Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of Music Mates, the series that we've been doing at the moment, primarily looking at 80s music. So far, in my opinion, we've done one masterpiece on the series, and that's been Remain in Light. Today, and the next episode, comes the mini Andor-esque arc, where we're talking about some real standout picks, albums that I love listening to, and I can't wait to get into them. And the arc starts now with none other than an 80s icon. 2 episodes ago, we reviewed the best-selling pop album of all time. Today, we're reviewing the best pop album of all time. But before we get into it, I want to talk about some of my honourable mentions from this year, which is 1984. So I want to start off by saying that the Smiths released their debut studio album titled simply The Smiths, and also their compilation album of BBC Radio 1 sessions called Hatful of Hollow. Both are really good albums that had such a fresh sound at the time, combining this punky style with indie pop right at the heart of the Manchester music scene. I'd recommend both of those. I also want to give a shout out to the album Diamond Life by the British soul, jazz and pop group Sade, led by the wonderful Sade Adu. It's another strong album from 1984. It has this really amazing, smooth, sultry production, and Sade singing on it is excellent. It's definitely a must listen. It's like being on a holiday in a tropical island somewhere in the Caribbean. Really, really good album. And I also want to give a shout out to Talking Heads yet again. They released their kind of album alongside concert film Stop Making Sense, which is secretly one of the best films of the whole decade, as Harry can definitely agree with. I know he's a big fan of the film as well.
Yep.
So, now that the honourable mentions are out of the way, I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about Prince, who is the artist that we're reviewing today. We're reviewing one of his albums. So, the artist formerly known as Prince was born Prince Rogers Nelson in Minneapolis, Minnesota on June 7th, 1958. After his parents divorced, he moved in with neighbours and ended up befriending the son of the family he moved in with called Andre. They went on to have a small breakthrough playing in the funk band 94 East, and Prince by 1977 had signed to Warner Brothers after releasing a fairly promising solo demo tape. His debut album was released not long after, called For You, which was noted for the fairly unique fact that Prince played every instrument and sang every vocal part on the whole album, which is something that at the time wasn't very common, especially for a debut album. The album Dirty Mind, released in 1980, was the first time Prince really garnered a massive amount of attention, and Prince really began to hone in on that sound he would go on to become known for. One that isn't very genre specific, that fuses a lot of different sounds and moods, from pop to rock to R&B, funk, a lot of synth work in there as well. And his outward visual aesthetic was also something that was really bold and stood out over his next few albums. He was known for being an artist who was quite risque, made very explicitly sexual music, and had quite an androgynous persona as well, which he definitely leaned into. Prince's futuristic double album 1999 was released in 1982, sporting massive hits with Little Red Corvette and Delirious, to name just a couple from the album. With 1999, Prince showed off his newly formed backing band for the first time, The Revolution, which would go on to work with him on multiple albums across the 80s. And the first time the classic Revolution lineup of Wendy Melvoin, Lisa Coleman, Matt Fink, Brown Mark and Bobby Z was established was for Prince's magnum opus Purple Rain, which was an album that formed the soundtrack for the semi-autobiographical film that supported its release, or rather the album that supported the film's release. The album's staying power in the charts, supported by numerous massive singles such as none other than the title track Purple Rain, which ended up being Prince's most successful song of his entire career, meant that at one time Prince had the #1 single, album and film in the US, which is pretty insane. Over the course of Prince's career, he went on to release 40, and this isn't a joke, 40 studio albums, an unbelievably jam-packed career that unfortunately came to a very tragic end on June 2nd, 2016, when Prince passed away at the age of only 57 from an accidental fentanyl overdose. An enormous outpouring from fans and artists alike came out upon hearing this news, with Prince charting high on UK, US album and single charts for a period after. Fortunately for us today, we're going back to the year 1984, where Prince was still alive and at the height of his success and fame. Purple Rain has just been released, a monumental achievement for any artist and a brilliant exercise in blending pop, rock, and other styles into creating a very lush, explosive experience with serious compositional chops as well. This album is made up of 9 tracks that all deserve to be on the set list and offer something to the core identity of the album. The songs are Let's Go Crazy, Take Me With You, The Beautiful Ones, Computer Blue, Darling Nikki, When Doves Cry, I Would Die For You, Baby I'm a Star, and last but definitely not least, Purple Rain. And these are the 9 songs that we'll be talking about today. But before we get into it, I wanted to ask you guys if any of you have listened to much of Prince's music before the album, and I want to hear a little bit about what your expectations were in terms of the kind of music that he made, and whether there was anything that any of you were surprised at all by.
Yeah, I had heard Purple Rain before because I think that's probably his. I don't know. Okay, I don't know how true this is, but I'm gonna hedge my bet and say it's his most like well-known song. I don't
Yeah,
know if that's
definitely.
okay. Okay, if you, I thought like if he had done something else that was like way more popular, I'd be like, I look like an idiot. Um, but yeah,
You
I
don't
other
remember Big Boomer?
if he,
Everyone's talking about Big Boomer by Prince.
if he had done some other song that was somehow like more popular than Purple Rain, like if he had done like the song that everyone sings for like Happy Birthday, I'd be like, oh fuck's sake, how did I not know that? Um,
Well, funnily enough, Tony, I think even though Purple Rain is his most well-known song, and if you ask anyone who isn't a Prince fan, what's the song you know by Prince, they'll probably say Purple Rain. It actually never reached number 1 in the US,
oh
whereas
really?
When Doves Cry and Let's Go Crazy both did reach number 1 at the time, which is kind of strange.
That is
And just one of those
interesting.
things that jumped out to me when I was doing a bit of research into the album. Yeah.
Also, if we're using Spotify, as we tend to do, it isn't his number one most popular song. Um, it's currently Kiss, which is another very well known song. And then Purple Rain and When Doves Cry are number 2 and 3, respectively.
Yeah, although Purple Rain has got more plays.
It does have more plays. That is true.
Interesting. I think that might be a case of like Purple Rain has more like staying power over the long years, whereas at the time I can see When Doves Cry being a huge hit because that is a great song. Um, yeah, definitely I knew Prince's reputation of being like one of the best pop stars of all time, which definitely I think was like a little bit of like a I'm gonna say it's like a little bit of like a like it was overhyped for me going into it of like, oh, am I going in with too high expectations because I hadn't really like sat down and listened to Prince ever. Um, so maybe that colored my my sort of listening of the album of like, is this the GOAT? I don't know. You said it so confidently that it was the best pop album of all time, Ethan. And
That's only my opinion, Tony.
yeah, true, true. But you said it like you could be speaking for the rest of the world. I'm like, damn, the rest of the world. What am I missing out on? But there are still a lot of songs in it that I really like. I really do like When Doves Cry.
So you're saying that you had really high expectations and you don't feel that those
Yeah,
expectations were completely met?
yeah. I think like Prince is like probably one of those like Michael Jackson or like David Bowie tier artists, and this album kind of feels like a little bit like I don't know. I'm not feeling that sort of the insane sort of star power that I was expecting from his like name recognition. But it's still really good. I think if it had been from like a nobody, if you had been like, oh yeah, some random person, I'd be like, wow, this is really good. But
Mm.
I feel like maybe I've hyped it up too much in my own head of being like, I'll finally listen to this guy, see what all the fuss is about.
Yeah, I mean, I could have been coming from a similar place where, like, I knew some of his song titles, but didn't actually know if I'd probably heard bits of the songs, but probably hadn't, like, listened through to any. So as uh, entering probably with less awareness than with Michael Jackson, but with yeah, knowing how big of a star he was, I actually remembered Prince dying, and how that sort of hit the news and some of the people around me, feeling like such a big loss. Um, Dying as well the same year as David Bowie.
Yeah. Bad year.
It's, yeah.
That there were a lot of famous people that died in that year. I remember it being something where at the end of the year people look back on it and it was like every 2 or 3 weeks some major star, whether it was an actor or a musician, had passed away. It was a really bad year.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, so he was always someone that I sort of feel like I really should listen to this guy, and so was entering with heavy expectations, similar to Tony. Although I feel like mine were a lot better met. Yeah, no, I can feel why Prince is Prince in a way I don't think I quite felt with Michael Jackson.
Oh, that's really good to hear. Was there anything that jumped out to you, Johnny, that was different between Michael Jackson, that meant you were able to enjoy this album a lot more?
Maybe it's just the fact of, because to me, Prince feels freer, more experimental, and like a safer pair of hands at the same time. I don't know. There's it's something that it felt like that in my head, but being critical, possibly it's just because with Michael Jackson I was entering with this is the best selling album, so I already had set up in my head the idea of this is commercial. Whereas the feeling I more have about Prince is this is more of an artist. Yes, he was large, but probably feels closer to David Bowie in my mind. So I think, I was probably entering in a space where I was more, I don't want to say prepared to like it than I did with Michael Jackson, because I was coming in wanting to enjoy Michael Jackson, but yeah, I recognise where I might be being biased.
Well, I definitely see where you're coming from. Michael Jackson was a really innovative figure, but I do think that with Purple Rain, you get the feeling like this is someone's complete and very well realised vision across the whole album. I know that he's got his backing band, The Revolution, which was supporting him quite a lot, but one of the things about Prince I really like is he's a huge auteur. I talked a bit about it in my intro, but I just love how involved he is with the whole process of writing a song, producing an entire album, and then getting it released. And it's something that you hear in the film industry all the time. A lot of directors being very heavily involved with every stage of getting a film made, and I think on this, Computer Blue might be the only song on the album that isn't credited entirely to Prince. I think other members of the Revolution are songwriters on that song, and from what I read online, it was very much he was the kind of leader in pretty much the whole songwriting process, but very differently to the film. In real life, a lot of band members felt like they could come to him with ideas and suggestions, and he would be really, really open to it, which I think is a great balance to have with your backing band. And I think in a lot of cases, having a chemistry like that and then having good ideas come from other places can make you see things with fresh eyes. In fact, Purple Rain, I'm pretty sure the opening chord progression of the song and the chord progression that forms quite a big part of the song was written by one of Wendy and Lisa, if not both, and they came to Prince with the chord progression, and Prince ran with it, which is a really, really good story. And I liked reading a lot about that when I was researching Purple Rain.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing, like the just the volume of music Prince has produced. like it's he's pretty much made like an album a year for a number of years. There's obviously that famous story about they found the vault full of like hundreds of unreleased tracks that I know there are now plans to kind of slowly release in the years to come. And I think the Michael Jackson comparison was one that was always going to be made, and I'm sure was made a lot of the time as well. Prince kind of has the reputation of just being a lot cooler than Michael Jackson ever was. It's a little bit of the kind of Friends Seinfeld thing, where Michael Jackson probably more commercially successful, but it feels like the kind of like in the know music people would put Prince on a higher pedestal. So it's interesting that we've done kind of their two kind of biggest albums, not quite back to back, but within very quick succession of each other.
Yeah, definitely. Just adding to that a second, I definitely agree with Jonathan when he says that Prince feels a bit freer when it comes to the way that he expresses, and I just want to compare one song on Thriller, "The Girl Is Mine," to "Darling Nikki" on this album, and to release a really, really mainstream, high-profile pop album with a song like "Darling Nikki" is really brave. I don't think if I was in his shoes in the mid-'80s, I would have done something like that. It's such a horny song, and the thing I quite like about it is not only does it just rock from start to finish, but he's got such a powerful delivery in so many songs across this album, and you really get the impression that Nikki is this kind of revolutionary figure in Prince's life, at least in the context of the song. The things that she's shown him and taught him, you get the feeling that he can't live without them and live without her. And it's not even just him, it's also the instrumentals in the song. The guitar work sounds like it's twitching and having an orgasm at times. It's such a crazy thing to say out loud, but if you listen to the song, I think you kind of hear that a little bit. It's a really visceral experience.
Yeah.
He 100%.
It was interesting because when first listening through, just kind of in the background, I'm at work, I'm not really paying attention to the lyrics because I have to be thinking thoughts. But I sort of remember at one point kind of noting, I quite like the drive with this song. Have no idea what it's about, not listen to any of the lyrics. Darling Nikki, right? I'll make sure to pay attention to that later. And so when sitting down to just one-on-one, just right, what's this song? Oh, this is what it's about. Wow. But yeah, no, it's just it's I think because it manages to not be weird, or I don't know, it is so itself that I don't know. So when you're trying to make when you're trying to make a horny song, it can easily be quite cringe, but it's not cringe. I think that's as good as I can express it.
Yeah, it's kind of tied up in his persona, and I know you probably haven't seen the film Purple Rain, but you can see in the album cover this is a very androgynous kind of attractive man who definitely fucks a lot, and is just quite not only a singular artist, but quite a confident individual, very talented, very comfortable in his own skin. In a way that I don't want to keep comparing him to Michael Jackson, but in a way that Michael Jackson isn't really. And he is cool. Not only everything we said about Darling Nikki, which is a great track, is true. I think I have a similar kind of feeling about The Beautiful Ones, which is one of my favorite tracks in the album. In that it's got a similar structure. It's not quite as aggressive until the ending, but it the whole song kind of just edges you, basically. It's very sensual.
It's the goon sesh.
Yeah, and then you get to the last kind of minute of the track, and it really kind of explodes, and it's it's kind of epic in scale. But yeah, I have similar thoughts about that track.
His voice work for Beautiful Ones. Oh.
Yeah, I think I will have to come in and be the contrarian for Darling Nikki. To make a different comparison. And I think chronologically this came out later in history, but Darling Nikki made me think of all the Red Hot Chili Peppers songs we did for that album, Blood Sugar Sex Magic. And it made me think of them in the sense that I was like, oh, I get the vibe they're going for. This is like kind of like a sexual kind of like funky song. But I was thinking it, comparing it as like, man, in like, what was it? Funky Lady or whatever the song's called, in any random Red Hot Chili Pepper song that has that same kind of tone, they go 11 out of 10 sort of strength with it. And this in Darling Nikki, I felt like he's like pulling back a little bit. He's like trying to be suave about it. I was like, no, if you're gonna sing about someone getting a boner or whatever, you can't just be like suave. You gotta play into how funny it is. Which was the thought that came into my head of listening to Darling Nikki, of like it doesn't have that same sauce, that hot chili pepper sauce that I was missing. And also to comment on the Michael Jackson comparison before we go too far from it. I feel like I kind of see what you're saying about like that you get the vibe of Prince being more of like a experimental and more of like an artist with like what they want to do. But I feel like Michael Jackson did such a better job of conveying their like when someone is this famous, you kind of want that sort of charisma to be conveyed across in their music. And I don't know if Prince has that same pizzazz. I mean, obviously, I don't know if anyone has that same pizzazz as Michael Jackson. But still, like I was in that sort of like it draws that comparison, and I think it comes up a little bit short in terms of like just overall, just like the intensity and the power is just not as compelling as I would have liked.
That's really interesting, because one thing I wouldn't have said about Michael Jackson is that his music has any kind of intensity. Whereas for me, a lot of these songs, especially like the beautiful ones and the last 2 minutes of that song, everything is working together in agreement, and it's just rising, rising, rising. You've got the guitars that are shrieking, the drums that are pounding, and Prince's singing might be the best in that 2 minute section that it is in the entire album. He's just screaming his heart out, and I just find it impossible not to be blown away by it every time I listen to it. And yeah, it's really, really strong. In fact, in the film, which certainly has its own issues across the board, the strongest part of the entire movie is the musical numbers. And even though people probably remember the sequence at the end of the film when he performs Purple Rain right at the end, I think my favourite scene in the film is actually when he performs The Beautiful Ones, because Apollonia is sat in the crowd like kind of 10-20 metres away. And it is shot a little bit like a concert film where it's mainly just Prince on stage singing. But there's this amazing cut that it does when the transition happens from the sort of moodier, ballady kind of pace of the song into the last 2 minutes of the song. And it's the part where he says, "Do you want him or do you want me? Because I want you." And he points to her in the crowd, and then it cuts to her and the camera's kind of zooming in on her face. And like when you see moments like that on screen, I think it just captures the weight of the song. It's like what The Beautiful Ones is leading up to. The fate of the whole fucking world hangs in the balance. That's the sort of feeling that I get listening to the last couple of minutes of this track, and it's certainly a highlight for me. It really is.
Yeah, I think maybe it might also just be my personal taste, but the parts where he gets a bit like too screamy with it, I just normally am not a fan of that sort of texture when it comes to vocals. Like we just came off the back of Frontiers by Journey, and that's a lot of intensity, but it's never in that sort of like screechy kind of range. It's more of just like the consistent powerful notes, whereas when Prince is going hard, he just goes with like a little that sort of like scratchy tone. Maybe I'm just not a fan of it. I don't think it's like bad in general.
Yeah, I mean you're outnumbered on this podcast in terms of
the John.
Yeah, sorry, Tony.
Yeah,
someone's got to be the heel.
It is, yeah. It is. I think there's times when it works and it doesn't, and I think Prince makes it work. It's a thing that is hard to do in the right sort of way, but I don't know. It works for me in that song, and yeah, in and generally, yeah, just the way all of it comes together, for me at least, comes together in a much more interesting and fuller way than than Michael Jackson. I feel bad that it's coming back to that constantly. um,
To get Tony back on track, I mean, I know we've talked about the different kind of vocal stylings of Prince, but like a real highlight of the album is the guitar work, and how much it just absolutely fucking rips. So should we talk about When Doves Cry, maybe? Because I know Tony's a big fan of that song.
We should. I'll rescind all of my Prince dissent for When Doves Cry. It's a full 180. I think it's an amazing song. I think it's a hard carry of the album, but I really like it.
But in the outro section, he does scream and shriek a little bit in that kind of stretched out 3-minute sort of semi-instrumental, I guess, I don't even know what I would call it. I guess ad-libs, if you want to call it that. Does that part of the song, do you like that as well? Or do you prefer more the first half that has a bit more of a conventional song structure?
I think I would say I probably prefer they're just like the main like riff part where it's like, is he singing with someone else and it's like a duet? I don't know, or is he just layering his own vocals? I don't know how songs are made. But yeah, there's definitely like a great, like, I guess some kind of like harmony with the vocals in When Doves Cry that gives it this much nicer texture compared to some of the other like screechy stuff.
Yeah, the chorus plays 3 times. I think the first time it's him by himself, and the second time it's him performing with an additional harmony or two, maybe one that's slightly a lower pitch or a higher pitch, whatever. And then the third time that you hear the chorus just before it breaks out into that instrumental section is when, for me, it's just in complete full flow, because it's not just a sort of one-to-one harmony. It's like... It's just like... Oh, I don't even know how to describe it. You just got to listen to the song. The way that the extra vocal tracks layer on top of each other and interject and work with the sort of main bulk of the chorus, I think is really, really strong. And Harry's absolutely right. It starts off with this just rip-roaring guitar solo before it transitions into the main verse. And the chorus just sells me every time. I think When Doves Cry is also my favourite song, along with Let's Go Crazy. It's really just a complete song for me, because you've got the main bulk of the song, which is really fantastic and epic. And then you've got those last 2 or 3 minutes that feel a bit improvisational, and Prince vocally just seems like he's kind of going with the flow in the way that he interjects every now and then. And I also think the synth work is really good, like that kind of like do 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 do, you know, the moment right at the end just before the song finishes, I think is very, very cool and a good way to close out the song too. Before we move on to another section, I just wanted to say quickly, there's a really funny story behind When Doves Cry, actually. So the director of the film wanted Prince to go away and write a song that would fit a particular part of the film. And I think he asked him to do it sometime in the evening or late one night. And then the next morning, Prince came back to him, and he hadn't written one song. He'd written 2 songs, even though he was asked to write one. And he wrote 2 songs in a very short space of time, and one of them was When Doves Cry.
Wow.
This is just insane. Like, there's another great story about when he wrote the song 1999 on 1999, and they were coming back from a party with some friends, and he wasn't really in the mood to do that, so he just stayed up all night and wrote one of the hit singles off his next album. And yeah, it just goes to show how much of a music-minded person he was, and he really loved his art.
Yeah, the amount of music he can crank out is like, he did like an entire album for the 1989 Batman film, didn't he? Like, I don't know if he was asked to, or if he was asked to contribute a song when he just did an album.
I think they could stop him even if they didn't ask him.
Yeah, it's one of those things that makes you think potentially he's either a massive plagiarist or has the ability to like freeze time to like work on music. Like, I don't know how he produces the volume he has.
Some people are just built different.
Yeah.
Clearly. Going back to the film really quickly, I mean, it's not great. Like it's very 80s. It's essentially a vehicle for Prince, you know, understandably, and for the songs. You know, it's in that weird kind of period where music videos are kind of growing, and you're able to kind of get a couple of films made. And also films like Top Gun, Rocky 4, which are very kind of 80s, almost music video vehicles in the form of films. But When Doves Cry is the song that probably works best with the film, in that it kind of, I mean, it makes sense now. I've heard what you've said about the origin of it, Ethan, but like it kind of captures the central idea of the film, kind of about generational trauma and this guy kind of seeing like his worst behaviors like reflected in like his kind of parents and not wanting to kind of fall into that same trap. And again, I think the song is way more successful in conveying this theme than the film is, because it's not a great film, but it is, you know, an absolutely phenomenal song.
Yeah, I also had the same feelings about the film. I'm glad I watched it because it added a bit of context to the album and how the songs fit into the film story, which I liked. And the other thing is that knowing that Prince basically wrote the album Purple Rain about Apollonia and then seeing how she looks in the film makes a lot of sense, because now I want to write an album about Apollonia. She's just so hot.
Do you want to make her jump into a lake and physically abuse her as well, Ethan?
No, I'm good. We can skip over those scenes for sure.
Oh, what a film.
It was kind of what I expected it to be, Harry. I don't know if you felt the same way, but I expected it to be a film about a bunch of musicians that don't really know how to act and aren't really directed very well. But then what holds it all together are the musical numbers, which are just amazingly performed by Prince, The Revolution. Even the scenes with Maury, where he's with his group, like they're not great songs, but they're well performed and they're well shot, don't you think?
Yeah, I think just to explain for the other two, the central kind of conceit of the film is Prince kind of having this relationship with this woman where he just acts like a complete piece of shit to the whole film, and then sings Purple Rain at the end, and then, you know, she forgives him. But the idea you have to buy into is that there's this club where Prince performs at, and then there's these other musical acts who perform, and like in the film they're like, "Oh, Prince, you're terrible. No, you're not getting crowds like you used to." And like he's performing the songs from Purple Rain, which are fantastic. And then you hear the other music and see the other performances, and it's just like, God, this framing device doesn't work at all. But you know, you basically do get to experience the entire album live through the stage performances, and then sometimes through kind of montages. Again, in a very kind of 80s music video, kind of MTV, Top Gun kind of aesthetic way. And yeah, you get to see him ride around on his designed kind of purple motorbike with his own logo on it, which is pretty cool.
That is cool.
Although the other thing it wants you to accept is like Prince looking like he does, wearing these immaculately tailored outfits, you know, hair, like looking like a real rock star, driving around on his custom motorbike, still lives in this like rundown house with his parents, you know. That's another thing you kind of just have to go along with.
It's funny. I think Take Me With You is my other favorite song on the album. I'd say When Doves Cry and Take Me With You are my favorite too. I know Ethan, you said Let's Go Crazy was your favorite one, so I just wanted to disagree.
Well, no, Tony, they're all my favourites, right? But I've got
be
favourites, and then I've got absolute favourites. That's the difference.
Yeah, Take Me With You, and also a couple others on this album. They give me this good sense of like atmosphere. I feel like a lot of them made me think of being on a road trip, and I know we often listen to music when we're like traveling. So this made me think like, yeah, this is a good album for listening just like in a drive somewhere, or in one of those camper vans. So that's why I like it.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned travel, because I'm a bit of an obsessive when it comes to this album. I'm not kidding. I probably listen to it about once a month, sometimes more, and I've done that for about 2 years now. And recently I started working in London, and my commute into London is a bit of a pain. And there was one time where I was travelling in and I couldn't get a seat, and it was it was a Tuesday morning, so it was very, very busy, and I had to stand, and there were just people all around me. And I was thinking of something to do to just pass the time while I was on the train. And I put my earphones in and I listened to this album, and it really had this just fade the world around me effect to it. I just closed my eyes on the train, and it really was like I was in the album. I was ignoring the smell of all of the sweaty men that were around me, and I could just focus on the music, and it was a really, really great feeling, actually. I just think this album, in a lot of ways, even though again it has, not often, but it has some serious themes and serious moments, is really really positive and inspiring, and also has quite a celebratory I don't know if I've pronounced that word right, but it has quite like a celebratory feeling to it, like it's this non-stop party. And the fact that it starts off with something like Let's Go Crazy, which has this opening that just, I think, instantly grabs you, because it has this really ethereal, otherworldly kind of organ part, and Prince's monologue over it, which is fantastic. It has so much gravity behind it. I think it really mesmerizes you, especially with the effects that he uses, some kind of delay reverb thing going on. It's almost like it's just being beamed directly into your skull. I think it works so well. And then after you've got the monologue, it quickly goes into that I can only describe as a contagious mood that I think is across the whole album. Like I said, it's this non-stop party atmosphere, and I love the messaging of Let's Go Crazy as well. Like, it's about living in the moment and trying to make the most of what you do have, and then celebrating that fact. I just think those kind of messages and some of the ideas that are across all of the album are really, they just make you feel good, and I think that's something that's worth saying and praising about it.
Yeah, I think there's a real fusion of kind of that kind of upbeat kind of 80s, more kind of glammy and poppy kind of style, with a lot of synth work with the kind of the kind of harder edge rock stuff. And for me, there are songs where it leans too much into one than the other. So I agree that I love Let's Go Crazy as an opening track. I think it works really well. And then obviously When Doves Cry, Darling Nikki, the beautiful ones, we've briefly discussed. The ones where it kind of maybe doesn't work quite as well for me are I Would Die For You and Baby I'm a Star, which I think lean a bit too much into the kind of upbeat 80s kind of poppy tracks, in that they sort of in my head kind of blend into the same song that I'm not a huge fan of. It's also interesting that you have those two, and then it kind of ends with Purple Rain, which is this kind of epic, very iconic kind of 8-minute track. And also just to quickly say that in the film ends with that order flipped, where it has Purple Rain as the kind of the emotional kind of payoff, and then it ends with those kind of two upbeat tracks. But yeah, I just wanted to give some kind of balance as to why, in my opinion, this album isn't a 10. That there are a couple of tracks that kind of do lean a bit too much into that kind of upbeat 80s kind of pop aesthetic, which I don't like as much as the kind of harder rock stuff.
That makes sense. What are your thoughts on the song Purple Rain, you three? Is it a song you like? Where does it kind of fit into your enjoyment of the album? Is it one of your favourites, one of your least favourites, and why?
I do like a lot of what it's going for, but I also think for a song to be almost 9 minutes long, it has to be like literally the best song ever made. And I don't know if Purple Rain is like literally the best song ever made. So I may be being a bit too stingy with my like of the song, because I do like the same, the sort of central chorus of it is this so well known for a reason. So there's a good like sense of like passion to it, but 8 minutes and 45 seconds. Sheesh.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it justifies about 5 or 6 minutes of its length, and then it does just kind of peter on. And I kind of get what he's going for, like with the kind of epic scale of it again. It probably falls somewhere in the middle. I think it's if I were to rank the songs, it would maybe be bang in the middle. But yeah, I understand why it is so iconic. I mean, it's got quite a memorable kind of, I guess, chorus. I guess it's a song that's quite easy to get stuck in your head. I don't know what you think, Johnny.
Yeah, I guess because I've never really questioned the length, to be honest. I think with it sort of coming at the end of the album, Maybe I'd feel different just listening to it independently. But I feel it works with the length. It does to me feel like an epic that probably does deserve to be about that long. um, yeah, no, it's a great song.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with Johnny on this 100%. I think it's okay for songs to be 8 or 9 minutes long, as long as they, as Tony said, justify that length, and I think it does. One thing I want to talk about with the song Purple Rain is, and this sort of crops up a couple of times on the album. I don't know if you guys know what I'm talking about. Maybe you didn't really notice, but there are a few moments on the album that I think are quite ominous and leave me with a mixed feeling on the song. And I don't mean mixed as in I don't know whether I liked it or not. Just that it often leaves me feeling quite strange. Darling Nikki has something like this, where right at the end there's this really weird, like, backmasking passage and the sound of wind blowing, which after a song that is as, well, passionate and hot and steamy as Darling Nikki is, feels interesting, I guess. And I do like it. It's just bizarre.
Yeah, no, I think with Purple Rain, there's sort of something almost ethereal to it in moments, where, and 'cause I guess it's sort of that song of just, I don't know, standing for a moment and reflecting, and it's on things that aren't all good and aren't all bad.
Yeah, for sure. It's a bit ambivalent. I agree with you. It's I'm talking about the last kind of, I would say about a minute and a half of the song. It just feels tonally different to everything that came before, and it's still just as immense. But it's sad, and it makes me wonder why it's sad. You know, you've just put together the most uplifting, awesome album, and you end it with this string section that has quite a lot of sorrow to it. And I'm sure that, as you said, Johnny, it sort of relates to the themes of the song, and it's about faith and trust and the great beyond. I guess with this fantastical phenomenon that is rain, it's the colour purple. But I think these kind of moments make the whole album more than just the fun they have on the surface. I think there are some things about it that are sonically quite thought-provoking. Tony, Harry, I don't know if either of you two have any kind of idea what I'm talking about, or if it's just not something that really jumped out to you listening to the song.
Yeah, I don't think I noticed as much of the sort of like somber attitude that you're getting at, but also I think I probably could do with listening to the album more to kind of pick up on it.
Yeah, I think I do. I mean, I've already kind of touched upon it, but I think it's really interesting how the film flips the order of Purple Rain and then the sort of two tracks that precede it to give the film this kind of, you have the kind of sorrowful, emotional kind of piece followed by like a party atmosphere before the credits roll, whereas the album you kind of have that kind of, in my opinion, little dip before ending with something that is quite sorrowful and quite powerful, and it does leave the album on quite an interesting note. I think my problem, and this is definitely more a me problem because it's clearly one of the greatest albums of all time, is that the song is so long that we're talking 8.5 minutes, that by about the 6th minute I have sort of lost interest a little bit, so I do kind of let the song wash over me a little bit, and I'm not really kind of taking it in as much, and I'm sort of ready for it to wrap up by that point. That being said, it doesn't really like dampen my enjoyment of the album. I still think it's a really strong one. Pretty much no songs on it that skips. It's rightfully incredibly iconic, and I'll always forgive an album's final song for being long or indulgent or trying something different. I think I've pretty consistently said that throughout this podcast.
Yeah, I was going to say, you say that once an episode. It's become
I always do. You can do anything
with two instrumentals back to back, then that is an unforgivable crime.
We never talked about that, really. I think we need to do about 10 more minutes on
that. Before we, I guess, come to the closing stage of the podcast, I did just want to go back to Take Me With You for a second, because I wanted to talk a little bit more about what I like about the song, because I know Tony mentioned that he was a fan. I don't know if you agree, but I thought it had a really Christmassy feel to it. And I'm not sure what it is. I think it's very romantic, which I think is part of it, but also the main melody with the bells has this really holiday season feel to it for me.
Yeah.
And there are multiple songs on this album that annoy me because my favourite passage will only play once in the entire song. We've not really talked about Computer Blue, which is a bit of a shame because I think it's a really good song, but Computer Blue suffers from this as well. There's that part where he says, "Till I find the righteous one, Computer Blue." And I really like the delivery and the kind of feel of that moment in the song, but it only plays once and it never repeats. And in Take Me With You, there's a part where Prince and one of Wendy or Lisa are singing. I'm not sure which of the two it is. It might even be both. It's harmonising with him. It's the "I don't care if we spend the night at your mansion." And it's kind of 4 lines that are really, they're delivered in such a joyful and intimate way.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
any time that I listen to those 4 lines, the "I don't care if we spend the night at your mansion, I don't care if we spend the night on the town, I just want to be something something," it's that kind of section of the song. It really just feels like getting this warm hug from someone. And I'm just so upset that I only get to hear that whole passage once, because I just think the harmonizing work on it is really strong too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You've picked out a particular kind of small moment in the song that it always stands out when I listen to it. And I think that's always the sign of a great song, and also just a great album, when it's full of those little moments you just want to like get to. You just want to like, oh, I just want to hear the last minute of this. I just want to hear the riff at the end of Computer Blue. When it's like when you watch a great film, the scenes you want to rewatch again and again. When you get to those kind of little bits of songs that have such an interesting texture, or are so joyful, or just kind of like tickle your brain in the right way. And I think it's quite hard to kind of verbalize. I think you've done quite a good job there, but I agree that for me the album's full of them, and that is one moment that always stands out.
Yeah, this album does have a lot of moments like that.
I think it's what helps it feel so rich, and the fact that he doesn't have to go, well, this moment nailed it in this song, so that's, I don't know, the whole song is that moment. It's, no, that can be a moment in the song. There will be others. There will be a moment in this next song, and a couple more after that. I don't need to reuse this one. I have 3,000 moments.
Yeah.
On only one album I'm making here.
Yeah, Prince is not short for cool little musical moments. He's got them in spades.
Did you guys know the story about Darling Nikki after the song came out? It was actually one of the biggest reasons why parental advisory stickers exist.
Ah.
Yeah, it's quite a cool fact about the song. There was some, I think, politician or someone that worked in education high up in America was angry that the song was on the radio or something, or that her 6-year-old daughter listened to the song or something like that, and so she went to some thing that decided, okay, well, from now on we should probably start putting these stickers on albums so that people know whether something is a bit too adult and shouldn't be listened to by children.
Yeah.
I think there are a couple of other songs as well around that time, but that's the one that often gets credited as being the reason why parental advisory stickers actually exist on albums, which I think is pretty funny and cool as well.
Fair play. Definitely deserves it.
Label too hot to handle.
Too cool for school.
Right. Are you guys happy to go on to the conclusion now? Is there anything else you wanted to say before we do that?
I think it's probably time to slap some scores on this bad boy.
Cool. So, as usual, I go last, so I delegate to one of you three to start off.
I feel like possibly for once there's the least question about what score I'm going to give this.
I'm just glad I could come up with an album on this series that you liked, Jonathan. It means a lot to me.
Yeah, so entering this album, as I said, I wasn't even sure if I'd properly listened to a Prince song. knew he had a reputation for being a great songwriter and performer. Um, so I came in with high expectations and was worried for, well, yeah, that they would not be met. But pretty much from the moment of sitting down, just Let's Go Crazy just washing over me, being like, no, people are right. I'm in the right place here. And then yeah, that's sort of continuing on, and still things sort of coming and shining through, even reaching later into the album. And reaching this point, I question with the previous albums, am I going to go back and like even listen to any songs off it, or let alone the whole album? And I look at this one and I think, well, I'm going to be listening to Darling Nikki for a while, and probably Let's Go Crazy. And probably every now and again I'll just put it on as I do work. So yeah, this will be a 10 from me.
Oh wow! Oh my god, Johnny! Yes. Oh, that's great! I'm so happy.
It might have been because I am doing my weird things are either a 1, 5, or 10.
Oh yeah, of course.
I've not fully thought if. I don't know in a more usual scoring system how it would end up, but it would be in contention for a more regular 10. Because I do have to be kinder on albums anyway, because rarely is there going to be an album where I'm like, all of these songs are 10 out of 10s, and my brain struggles to give an album a 10 out of 10 if not every song is a 10 out of 10, which is stupid. I need to get better than that. But yeah, not to detract, but this is a 10.
Right. Harry, do you want to go next?
Yeah, happy to. I think it's an album that's grown in my estimation every time I've listened to it. I think it's probably jumped a point every time I've listened to it, and I found more to enjoy. As I say, I think there's 9 tracks, and it's got a pretty good hit rate for me. I think 5 of 9 are songs that I can't wait to get to, and even the songs I don't like as much, like Computer Blue, I just think are still really, really strong songs. I think it's a 9 from me. I think the film's probably not a 9, but I'm glad it exists because it gave us this fantastic album. So yeah, a 9 from me.
All right, I'll go. I think even though I think I've played the part of the hater for this podcast, I do like it. I think it is also like kind of growing on me in my estimations. But then I listened to the end of Beautiful Ones where he's like screaming a bit too much. I'm like, okay, it's going back down in my estimations.
The best part of the album.
But also, I think this album does have a great sort of, as I mentioned, that road trip vibe kind of contributes to sort of a good like range of emotions and sort of atmospheres that it goes through. It starts with a lot of like fun energy with like Let's Go Crazy, and then sort of brings it to like a nice sort of mellow point with things like Purple Rain. So maybe I think if I had sort of a different frame of mind going in, instead of expecting this sort of like, oh my god, it's Prince, it's the number 1 pop star of the world type album, I'm more just taking it what it was. I think I'd like it a little bit more. And also, I can't give anything that has the sort of main riff from When Doves Cry a bad score. So I'll give it a 7 out of 10.
So as for me, we've talked about the consistency of the album, the quality of the songwriting, the performances, the track listing. It's all really, really strong. But perhaps the thing I like the most about the album and why I come back to it as much as I do is it's just about how it makes me feel about myself. As you guys know, most music I listen to is very downbeat and dark and serious, and that isn't to say that this album, as I've mentioned a few times, doesn't have serious moments or themes at times, but its approach is just way more positive, like I said, and invigorating, and that's the key part. It's so rare for me to listen to an album that doesn't just make me feel good, but makes me feel good about myself as well. That's really rare, and I can only think of a handful of albums like What's Going On by Marvin Gaye is another one. When listening to that album, it's almost like a form of medication. It's self-healing in some way, because the sounds and themes remind me to take take some better care of myself as well, and Purple Rain is exactly like that. I don't think you can put a price on something like that, so I'm going to have to give a 10 out of 10 as well, in case that wasn't obvious.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks for listening to it, guys.
Thanks
I'm
for having
glad
us.
you all enjoyed it to different extents. That's okay. I guess I will give a quick brief on what the next album is. So we're going to be doing another album that I am an incredibly big fan of, by one of my favourite solo artists of all time, Kate Bush. I can't wait for you guys to listen to that album, and I can't wait to talk about it on the next episode. So I guess I'll see you guys next time.